Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Political Science Tutorials. Hope all are doing fine. We are uploading videos on different important topics of political science regularly. Please subscribe our channel for similar content. In this video, I am going to discuss about a trend of studying historiography of Indian national movement from a different perspective, and that is the perspective of subalterns. Later it widened its scope of research, and at present it covers the studies of nation, caste, gender, race, etc. of South Asian countries. Here is a picture of a book's front cover edited by David E. Ludden. The name of the book is Reading Subaltern Studies, Critical History, Contested Meaning and the Globalization of South Asia. To understand the meaning of subaltern, a picture is represented here. A woman in couch, resting, and someone is pressing her feet and someone is combing her hair. This is symbolic, and you can understand that one is in higher position, that is elite or in dominant position, and rest two are of lower or in inferior rank. Now we will discuss about who initiated the project of subaltern studies, what the project was about, meaning of subalterns, who were with this project, etc. Though with the project of subaltern studies, many scholars are related, the pioneer role was played by Ranajit Guha. By birth, he is an Indian, born in 1923. Upon the attainment of Indian independence, Guha was sent as a student representative to Europe by the Communist Party of India. He returned in India in 1953 and taught here up to 1959. Between 1959 and 1980, he worked in England, first at University of Manchester, then University of Sussex. In Sussex, during the 1970s, with his students and like-minded fellow beings, he began the discussion about radical history, which eventually took shape of Subaltern Studies project. This intellectual process was the spread of radical historical scholarship, most commonly associated with history from below. What radical means? Radical means who wants great social or political change, simply who are against existing system. History from below. It means a people's history or narrative which attempts to account for historical events from the perspective of common people rather than leaders. And these scholars were influenced by the work of figures like Eric Hobsbawm, George Root, Christopher Hill and E.P. Thompson in the UK. These British Marxist scholars urged a study of poor people, principally workers and peasants, because this section have their own term of expression of oppression and they decide their strategy to resist it. These scholars used some of that dominant ideas of Marxist tradition to analyze the inner logic of their expression of oppression and resistance. The notion of the subaltern was first referred to by the Italian Marxist political activist Antonio Gramsci in his article Notes on Italian History, which appeared later on as part of his most widely known book, Prison Notebooks, written between 1929 to 1935. Originally, the term subaltern was to refer junior officers in military. Now we will see who are subalterns in Gramsci's language. The subaltern classes refer fundamentally, in Gramsci's words, to any low ranked person or group of people in a particular society in a domination of a ruling class that denies them the basic rights of participation in the making of social history and culture as active individuals of the same nation. From this definition, who are subalterns? The low ranked person of a group or particular society. And what treatment they receive from dominant class? The dominant class of this society denies their basic rights of participation in the making of social history and culture as active individuals of the same nation. What was the aim of theorists of subaltern studies? The first and foremost leader, as we have already discussed, of this literary movement was Ranajit Guha. He had written on peasant uprising in India. From 1970s, Guha and his intellectual associates would point to the gaps in ostensibly radical and Marxist scholarship in India, which has largely ignored the dynamics of peasant resistance to the state and to local relations of domination. So, their aim was to fill this gap and stress upon the autonomous consciousness of subalterns about exploitation and about their own way of resistance. The official discourse started in the first half of 1980s. The scholars led to a plan to launch a new journal in India. Oxford University Press in New Delhi agreed to publish 3 volumes of essay titled Subaltern Studies, Writings on South Asian History and Society from 1982, edited by Ranajit Guha. Total 12 volumes published between 1980 to 2005. So, their official discourse started in the year 1982. Like the British historians, subaltern theorists promised to write the history from below. Eric Hobsbawm, a British Marxist, is exceptional in his discussion of peasant consciousness and peasant politics because of his enthusiasm from Gramsci. He was very much influenced by Gramsci. Guha was influenced by Hobsbawm, which is reflected in his classic work Elementary Aspects of Peasant Insurgency in Colonial India, written in 1983. In this book, he took the help of independent observers to fulfill his project, official historical records, and it helped him to find the patterns, a certain pattern. Every record of law and order under colonialism cracked the code of resistance, or how peasants resisted against the system, through which colonial officials interpreted acts of peasant protest. So, official accounts of crime and disorder are helpful for this purpose. Here is name of some scholars who were with this project: Eric Stokes, Sahid Amin, David Arnold, Partha Chatterjee, David Hardiman, Dipesh Chakraborty, Gyanendra Pandey, Sudipta Kobiraj, Gyan Prakash, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, Sarojini Sahu, Gautam Bhadra, Sumit Sarkar, who later dissented. Now we will discuss about the perspective from which they narrated the history. According to subaltern studies scholars, in Marxist narration of Indian history, there is an angle to focus on political consciousness of elites, and they inspire masses to resist and rebellion against British. But this is not true. They ignored a majority people, that is subalterns or peasants, tribes or forest dwellers who has their own inner logic and consciousness to resist colonial rulers. By the early 1980s, some elements of a common perspective had been sketched out, a perspective we might call subalternist. This group of scholars argued that there were two separate domains of politics in colonial India. One is elite and another is subaltern. How they defined the elite domain? This domain was characterized by forms of activity that were recognized as political. Elites were consisted of educated people who interact with the state through petitions, public meetings, journalism, lobbying, etc. Who were subalterns? Their composition was completely different from that of elite. It was generally regarded by historians as pre-political because it has no clear articulated demands and seemed not to follow the established rules of politics. Here is a slide to clear this concept. Domain of politics in India of two types according to subaltern scholars: elite, which is political, and subaltern, who is pre-political. They argued that peasants, tribes and forest dwellers did not rebel out of primordial urges or nor purely out of hunger. Their movements staked very specific claims. They were against colonial authority as well as authority of landlords and moneylenders, who were the exploiters and oppressors in local level. Their medium of expression of resistance was religious. They organized themselves along community lines such as caste or tribe. For instance, peasants frequently claimed to have been inspired by a local god who ordered them to rebel. Earlier historians dismissed it as a mere superstition. But on the contrary, subalternist scholars mined deep into popular beliefs, folklores and rumors to explain the political logic of such religious assertions. They analyzed the facts and gave a suitable explanation and find out the political logic behind this type of religious assertions. According to subalternists, nationalism was a middle class or elite affair, and many of local oppressors like landlords, moneylenders were closely associated with national movement. So, nationalism needed to be understood both as a movement by Indians against colonialism and as a political project on the part of Indian elites to keep subaltern militancy in check. Because subaltern militancy, according to subaltern scholars, subaltern militancy was a threat also to nationalist leaders. Here is name of some popular essays of subaltern studies, and from these titles you can understand what was about subaltern studies. In early 1980s, Sahid Amin, in his essay Gandhi as Mahatma, he locates the personality of Gandhi as it registered into the consciousness of simple peasants. From secondary sources of local newspapers in 1920s of Gorakhpur about an occasion of visit of Gandhi, he asserted that Gandhi was as alien as the British to the people of Gorakhpur. In the news of Gandhi's arrival, politically dormant people suddenly wake up and a large mass gathered to see him and to hear him. In their eyes, Gandhi became a Mahatma. In early 1920s, his popularity increased among peasants, but later the perception of masses changed. In another essay, David Hardiman asserted a tribal movement in early 1920s was against local liquor dealers. They have monopoly rights over the supply of alcohol. This movement, he shows, was connected with local popular religion. A local goddess was supposed to have taken possession of spirit mediums and instructed the tribe to give up alcohol, abjure witchcraft and obey Gandhi. In his study of the peasant movement in Awadh in 1919 to 1922, Gyanendra Pandey revealed that it began as an autonomous movement of the peasantry in which the peasants had their own sense of grievance, initially against the landlords and subsequently against the British Raj. They had their own ideology and methods, but it was unapproved by the middle class nationalists like Gandhi and Nehru. From the previous discussion, it is clear that subaltern theorists' elitist historiography denied the autonomy to the subalterns in the historical process and reduced it to inactivity. According to subaltern theorists, the peasantry could not throw off its subordination on its own, but what is remarkable is that peasant politics possessed substantial autonomy within the encompassing structure of subordination. In other words, subalterns are able to fight for their own emancipation. In late 1980s and throughout 1990s, subaltern studies seemed to move away from its original remit, or it changed its direction. It shifted in post-colonial studies. It endorsed by Edward Said, and this trend established as a globally influential perspective from the Third World. In other words, the scope of subaltern studies widened beyond India and beyond peasants and workers. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak's intervention was influential with her essay, Can Subalterns Speak? This essay addressed the problem of women as subaltern in terms of political suppression. Indeed, this essay has guided an entire theoretical field by its contemplation that the subalterns, the socially evicted, cannot be heard by socially privileged. In foreword to the celebrated 1988 Selected Subaltern Studies, jointly edited by Guha and Spivak, observed that subaltern studies had become an extension of the struggle between subaltern and elite and between Indian masses and British Raj. Dipesh Chakraborty writes, which once denoted a series of Indian history, now stands as a general designation for a field of studies often seen as a close cognate of post-colonialism. Or in other words, subaltern studies is now not confined, rather ventured in another fields which is more universal. Edward Said expressed subaltern study a post-colonial project. The term post-colonialism is also sometimes used to refer to the struggle of indigenous peoples in many parts of the world in the early 21st century. According to Gyan Prakash, it is not only an intervention in South Asian historiography but developed into a vigorous post-colonial critique. It is the search for a structure of political consciousness that explained the nature of the subaltern condition and an acceptance that the turn to an analysis of discourses would provide a reformulation of the idea of subalternity as an effect of discursive systems. As we know, the subaltern studies started from a Marxist paradigm influenced by Gramsci and British Marxists, and the Indian Marxists were in a search for alternative historiography in Marxist lines. But by 1990s, subaltern studies had new implications. The world witnessed the breaking up of Soviet Union, Eastern Europe and the Balkans in the 1990s. It indicated failure of Marxism, communism and socialism. In this decade, post-colonial studies acquired a new centrality in academic discourse in various parts of the world. At this heart of this was the analysis of colonial discourse, the politics of the colonizer as expressed through linguistic codes and practices. The exercise of political domination through cultural means, the silencing of other voices and practices which did not conform to the norms set by colonial culture. But this shift from Marxist understanding and analyzing historiography of subalterns to post-colonialism make them vulnerable to criticism. They aim to establish distinct consciousness but end up with, according to Sumit Sarkar, who was also a founding member of subaltern groups, later he descended. According to him, radical left-wing social history has been collapsed into cultural studies and critics of colonial discourse. They changed their thinking line and they aligned themselves with Foucault and Edward Said, rather E.P. Thompson. Instead of these criticisms and true facts, we cannot ignore the importance of subaltern studies. In a society, we know there exists a varied notion of power relations. Colonial ruler, educated elite, common mass, peasants, workers, landlords and so on. This group recognized the multi-layer and difficult nature of social power and resistance. In initial phase, they were attached with the concept of Gramsci's subaltern and British Marxists, and they discussed history from below. But in latter phase, due to global political context and decline of Marxism, they shift their paradigm and they include the post-colonialism in their scope of discussion. From this whole discussion, we can conclude that its inception was to challenge the mainstream historiography and include the autonomous consciousness of subalterns or neglected class of society. Its key emphasis was on the independence movement, which was not only the credit of elite educated nationalist leaders. The resistance of subalterns also was a headache for colonial rulers, or that is, there was a pressure from below. They discussed about forms of power in coercive social context, where the subalterns were directly exploited from landlords, money lenders, and indirectly or directly from colonial rulers. They analyzed the pattern of resistance from subalterns. Through the decades, subaltern studies represents different intellectual lineage in political theory, social history and post-colonial studies. Dipesh Chakraborty asserts that its aim was to produce better Marxist histories, and this thought was never in rejection. According to subaltern studies theorist, it still works on the concept of nation, class, gender and social power critically. This group recognized a new way of thinking and epistemology to re-establish the legitimacy of indigenous histories. Lastly, we can say that subaltern studies started with radical politics or the politics of change and later shifted to post-colonial studies, and this combination make its scope wider and they provided an important paradigm to discuss the third world scholars. Hope the discussion about subaltern studies is clear to you. Subscribe the channel for important videos. Write your comment in comment box. Thank you.